September means call-ups are on the way to bolster the Mets roster, and they will need all the help they can get as the Mets begin a very difficult 10-game road trip today.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Well, the Mets had obviously a very rough series against the Marlins over the weekend. I talked about the series finale in a live stream right after the game where I broke down Kodai Senga's rough start and started to open up the conversation about what the Mets might do moving forward with Senga. So you can check out that show if you want a game recap. But anybody that watched the game probably just wants to flush it, and that's where the Mets have to be right now. They have to take that series that they just had against the Marlins and put it in the rearview mirror and move forward, because this is a critical road trip they're about to start here. 3 games against the Tigers, finally a day off on Thursday, then a series in Cincinnati over the weekend before they finish off their road trip in Philadelphia with a 4-game set against their division rival. And for those of you who weren't checking the standings over the weekend, the Mets are 4 games up on the Reds, and they are now 6 games back of the Phillies in the NL East. So it seems like the division may be a little bit out of reach now, but all you can worry about is the series in front of you for the Mets. That means the Tigers. And we'll talk about that series to close out the show today. But I wanted to spend some more time on Kodai Senga because, yes, I did discuss it on the live stream, but I didn't hear Carlos Mendoza speaking to the media. I also didn't hear what Kodai Senga had to say. And for Mendoza, he did not express too much confidence in Kodai Senga. He talked about how they have to get him right, they have to work with him, but he also mentioned that there'll need to be some discussions before he makes his next start, which leads you to wonder, is he going to make his next start? Kodai Senga said again that there was nothing wrong with him physically. He mentioned how he thinks he's close, talked about that second inning where he struck out the side and how it is there for him, but there's just times where he is not getting the hitters guessing, as he said, and when the hitters are not being surprised by his arsenal and they're sitting on things, that can lead to a lot of damage. So, when he gets guys guessing and when he can surprise them is actually what he said. He said that's when they typically are hitting the ball to our fielders. So with Senga, it's a really weird spot because the Mets have a couple of different options. Option 1, you get him into an MRI tube and you find something to IL him. You send him on the injured list, you let him reset, you let him go on a rehab assignment, and you see if he is a pitcher for you down the stretch. But you could nearly put him on ice for the year if you wanted to and just say, you know what? We don't know what happened. Kodai Senga was one of the best pitchers in baseball before his injury, and he came back and he just lost it. That's one option. Another option, you get him to accept a minor league assignment to get him out of the picture, and that's very rare. I mean, the only time I can remember in my time covering the Mets with this show since 2019, and even in the years prior to that, I've been covering the Mets in a written capacity dating back to 2015. I can't recall any minor league assignments that were accepted by a veteran other than JD Martinez last year to start off his season because he signed so late. He didn't get to have a typical spring training. So he accepted a minor league assignment so that he could just get at bats under his belt. I don't think that that's going to happen with Senga where he's not hurt and he ends up in the minor leagues. So that leaves you with 2 other options. You move him to the bullpen or you keep running him out there. And I really don't know what the best of those options would be. I just don't think, though, that you can put Kodai Senga in the bullpen and expect much more out of him other than pitching and mop-up duty in times. And, we saw him pitch out of the bullpen in the playoffs last year, and he wasn't right at all at the time. But I just don't think that Kodai Senga going to the pen is going to fix him. I think that's just a way to set him off to the side. But even then, we saw Frankie Montas on the roster before he went on the injured list, having a starting pitcher taking up a bullpen spot, even with expanded rosters, it does limit some of the things that you can do. So I really think he still makes a start. And I've talked about this a few times now, but here's how I sort of think that things are going to line up. For this upcoming series, which again, we're going to preview in the final segment, you got Manaea, McLean, and Holmes that are going to go over the next 3 days. You have an off day on Thursday, and Jonah Tong is the listed starter on Friday night in Cincinnati. On Saturday, it would be David Peterson following him, but I believe that's where Brandon Sproat should get entered into the mix here. And the reason I feel that way is because, for one, I just think at this stage, you got to see what you have in Brandon Sproat. He put up 7 shutout innings over the weekend, struck out 9, and he has been right in the conversation with Jonah Tong and Noel McLean to get the call. He's electric. He touches 99 with actually, he could throw over 100 with his fastball. His last start, he touched 99. He has just electric stuff. And the Mets have been playing better when they had their young guys on the hill. So I would go to Sproat and I would pitch him before David Peterson to give Peterson a nice long rest. That would give Peterson 7 days rest in between starts this year. He has been better the more rest that he gets, or at least when he is going on 5 days rest or more. On 4 days rest this year, he's made 5 starts. He has a 6.31 ERA. On 5 days rest this year, David Peterson has made 16 starts. He's a 2.94 ERA. And then on 6 days rest or more, he has a 3.49 ERA across 5 starts. So I would put Peterson out there on Sunday, give him some extra rest. Hopefully that gets him right. And then you could put Kodai Senga out there to open up the series against the Phillies. So then it would be Senga, Manaea, McLean, Tong against the Phillies. And that's how you would do the road trip. That's how you get Sproat into the rotation. Technically, at that point, you'd have 7 starting pitchers. But the way that I'm looking at it, Clay Holmes makes this start on Wednesday, and then he moves to the bullpen, but not even necessarily a straight bullpen role, because you could have Senga and Holmes sort of piggyback that outing against the Phillies next Monday, where, yes, Kodai Senga's the starter, but you have Clay Holmes on 4 days rest in the bullpen, ready to give you some innings if things go wrong with Senga. You can get Holmes ready, get him in there. Maybe he can give you some bulk relief. And if then the option is, all right, we're moving Senga out of the rotation, he just got knocked around again, Clay Holmes is still in position to be a starting pitcher moving forward. The other option, and actually the other thing too, is if Senga's great, then Holmes is just out of the bullpen for the rest of that series, where, again, he can give you length, and you can start to shorten him up and have him impact your back end of the pen, which is still clearly another issue for the New York Mets. But with Kodai Senga, it is a really tricky spot the Mets are in. And we're going to know, I think, pretty soon what the plan is, because if the plan is to remove him from the roster, I think that happens soon. I think the Mets get him an MRI, get him something. They end up ILing him to just put him on ice for a little bit and see if they can figure something out on a rehab assignment. But if that doesn't happen, they're either going to announce that he's going to the bullpen or he's going to make a start. And so I think the best course of action to get him right is to give him this week off. And if you want to, with the expanded roster, I mean, you could even, because everybody's going to be on extra rest, you have a day off on Thursday. And if you slid Sproat into the rotation next weekend or this upcoming weekend, all the guys are going to have extra days, where you can still open up that Philly series with Manaea, who'd be going on, I think, 6 days rest at that point. You could still go Manaea, McLean, and you could have Kodai Senga pitch on the 10th after having, a full, 10 days of rest, 9 days of rest from this start on Sunday all the way through to that start on Wednesday. So if they wanted to, they could give him even more of an extended rest, have him pitch multiple bullpens, and try to get right. They have the ability with the expanded roster to be creative. I think Sproat should be part of this equation sooner than later, but that's up to the Mets to say what they want to do. I want to tell you guys more, though, about Brandon Sproat and still being eligible for the playoff roster. I know I've mentioned this on a few shows now, but for those of you who might not have caught it, I've been giving you some wrong information over the past couple of weeks because I was unclear about the rule. So I want to explain that. I want to talk about how the Mets will just manage their bullpen with the expanded roster. Who else could enter this picture soon, and what's the September call-ups going to be for the Mets, which will relate to the bullpen, and then, of course, a new bat coming. So we're going to get to all that roster management stuff here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code SEASON. Get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already need. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commute, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code SEASON for a limited time 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code SEASON. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether you're looking at futures, maybe you're looking at player props, or you could be building a same-game parlay. I know from watching a Mets game, especially in person, sometimes I like to bet on Pete Alonso to hit a home run and the Mets to win. You can put those together in a same-game parlay, and you can even jump in on a game live as the action unfolds. It's quick. It's easy. It's the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays with football season. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. FanDuel, play your game. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I'd love to get there by the end of the season. Appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. First and foremost, let's talk about this rule that I've been getting wrong on the show for a few weeks now. I've been talking about how the Mets need to get Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat, Dylan Ross, all of these top prospects onto their 40-man roster by September 1st so they're eligible for the postseason, and I was flat wrong. The rule does read that way. In a typical season, any player who is on the 40-man roster or 60-day IL as of 11:59 Eastern Time on August 31st is eligible for the postseason. But here's the other part of it that I did not fully grasp. I think I might have mentioned it, but a player can be added via petition to the commissioner's office if the player is in the organization on August 31st and is replacing someone who is on the injured list. Now, the place where I got that messed up is I was thinking it had to be a situation where you have a pitcher who's been active and he goes down, and then all right, you can add a player onto your roster via petition, but it's like I thought that process was way more scrutinized. What it really comes down to, and why you pretty much, as long as they're in the organization, can add anybody, is if they're replacing somebody who is on the injured list, whether it's a 10-day IL stint who has been there for at least 10 days, or a 60-day IL stint for someone who's been there for at least 60 days, then they are able to be added to the roster. So what that means is Brandon Sproat can be added to make that start on, what did I say again? It's September 6th on Saturday. He could make that start and then be on the 40-man roster, obviously, to make that start, the active roster, be in the rotation all year. He might be so good, the Mets decide, you know what? All of our veterans are bad. We're going to roll with McLean, Tong, and Sproat in the wild card round. If they wanted to do that, they would just have to petition the commissioner's office and say, Brandon Sproat is replacing Griffin Canning on our playoff roster because Griffin Canning has been on the injured list for 60 days, and then they can get signed off on it. So this really is a rule that prevents teams from picking up a player in September who is then eligible. Like the Phillies just picked up Walker Buehler. He got cut by the Red Sox. And by the way, any Mets fan that's upset that David Stearns didn't sign Walker Buehler would fall right into the camp of a veteran pitcher you're trying to get right. The Mets have too many of those guys anyway. Okay, they don't need to figure out Walker Buehler when they are still trying to figure out Shaw Manaea, and they're still trying to figure out what they have at Kodai Senga. Like they are fine with the struggling veterans, while Walker Buehler has a great postseason resume and he might be an impact arm for the Phillies. He has not been very good this year. It's not a player you should be upset that the Mets didn't get. But Buehler was acquired right before that September 1st option. And actually, he signed a minor league deal, but he is in the organization now. So he signed a minor league deal. I guess he's probably going to pitch for their AAA affiliate and work on some things until he gets called up. That's where it works out for them because they got him in the organization before September 1st. He's still eligible for the postseason while he's replacing someone on the IL. I don't think he could replace Zach Wheeler because Zach Wheeler, I don't believe, would have served 60 days on the injured list by the time you get to that point. But I'm sure the Phillies have another arm on their injured list that they could petition the commissioner's office for and get Buehler added. So point is, we don't have to worry too much about getting these guys on the roster. And my apologies for not having that right. And now I know. So the upcoming seasons, I will not make that mistake again. It's obviously something that confused me. I think confuses a lot of people. Let's now talk about the specifics of this roster, though, and how everything fits together. When you're talking about this bullpen, Edwin Diaz, Tyler Rogers, Brooks Raley, Gregory Soto, Ryan Helsley, Ryan Stanek. Those guys are your leverage relievers right now. You feel good about 4 of them, I guess, with Rogers, Raley, and Soto joining Diaz. Helsley and Stanek, you're still trying to get right. If the Mets are going to hold on to Senga and add Sproat to the roster, they'd essentially have 7 starting pitchers. This is where I think a move of adding Sproat to the rotation would almost for sure be sliding either Senga or Holmes to the bullpen. I think it should be Holmes only because I think the bullpen could desperately use what Holmes could provide if he can get back to being the guy that he was with the Yankees, where he was one of the best setup men in baseball who also had closing experience. I think he'd slide right into the 8th inning even potentially by the time you got to the playoffs if he rediscovered that form. And who knows, after pitching as a starter all year, going back to a simplified relief role, it might be like riding a bike and become super easy for Clay Holmes. So we'll see what they decide to do with Senga and then how that would potentially impact Holmes. Also, if they even call on Brandon Sproat, because that's not even to mention Tyler McGill, who's going to make at least one more rehab start, but he is another guy that's available to replace a Senga or a Holmes in the rotation if the Mets go down that route. Now, when it comes to expanded rosters, who's going to be the call-up on the pitching side of things? You have currently Brandon Waddell on the roster as your long man. He did an amazing job pitching the rest of that game after Kodai Senga's rough start on Sunday. In the past, we've seen after a performance like that, you are thanked by being sent right back to Syracuse. In this instance, I don't know if that necessarily makes sense because you have this extra roster spot. And when you look at the options the Mets have, Kevin Herget, Chris Davinsky, Huascar Braziman, they've all just been cycled through. So none of them are going to be available for a couple of weeks here. You have Justin Garza, Dom Hanimal, Jonathan Pintaro, and Austin Warren, who all could come up and they're on the 40, but they each pitched 2 innings on Sunday. So none of them would be good to go on Monday. Your options on the 40, you have 2. Alex Carrillo, who last pitched on Friday, and Justin Hageman, who last pitched on Wednesday. I think Hageman joins this roster in Detroit because he gives you a long man who's stretched out. He made a start in that game on Wednesday through 67 pitches. So I think you get Hageman on this roster, but with him, I don't think you need to send down Waddell. And yes, I love to see Dylan Ross come up as the September call-up, but who do I think helps the Mets the most today? It's probably Justin Hageman because he gives you the most length. And you still don't know with Dylan Ross, who is a top pitching prospect we talked a bunch about this year. He's got over 70 strikeouts, and I don't know exactly how many innings pitched. I didn't pull it from my notes, but I want to say he's in the low 40s on innings pitched and over 70 strikeouts, throws over 100 miles per hour. I'd love to see him as an option to pitch and leverage, and I'd like to see it sooner than later so that you can see what you have. But with some of the uncertainties on Senga, on Holmes, what you're doing there, bringing up Sproat, I don't know if that's a move they make right away. And I think getting Hageman up is ideal. Now, the Mets could bring up Hageman, drop Waddell, and also bring up Dylan Ross. That is a distinct possibility. I would not rule it out, but I think for sure Hageman comes up today. I think that's the one thing I'd be pretty solid on. And then you're just going to see how they'll continue to cycle guys. Like they absolutely should call Austin Warren up at some point to give you another one of these mop-up duty appearances on either side, whether it's the Mets that are losing by a bunch or if they're winning by a bunch. I think Warren's the guy that can do that. theoretically, you can see that from Hamill or Pintaro, but those guys are still very inexperienced. So I don't know if we see them. I think there's a better chance that those guys are just eating up the innings that are left in Syracuse while you have more guys who are going to be unavailable with the expanded roster and being able to cycle through arms. Justin Garza, another one I don't really feel that great about. And, eventually the clock will reset on Herget, on Devansky, on Brazaban. So you should see all those guys again at certain points. And Reed Garrett, the news on him is things are going well as he's trying to rest that arm. It seems like he might only need a limited amount of time, but you still got, I don't have that in my notes here, but maybe 10 days. That roster move was not that long ago that Reed Garrett went on the IL. Let's see when he went on the IL. That was 6 days ago. So, yeah, I mean, you won't see him this week. We'll just say bottom line on that one. So, again, I think you see Hageman come up and you might keep Waddell so that you have him. Because remember, if you option Waddell, unless somebody gets hurt, he's done for 2 weeks. So you basically eliminate Waddell until the middle of September. And I think he might be the best of the longman options. So ideally, I'd like to see the Mets keep him on the roster because they have the ability to do so. Now, if you're in a situation where you call up Hageman, Minaya goes 3 innings today, and your bullpen is getting burned, then you got to do what you got to do. You might have to option both of those guys and go from there. So we'll see what the Mets choose to do on that front. But that is my expectation on the September call-ups. If it's going to be someone exciting, it'll be Ross that'll come up because Sproat, you're not going to see him until the weekend at the earliest anyway. And I think on the pitching front, September call-ups, it's more just, okay, cool, you can now roster 14 guys. Because that's another thing. Those of you who might know, during the regular season before September, you can only roster 13 pitchers. When they expand the roster to 28 in September, you can add another arm. 14 pitchers is the new maximum, and then obviously you add another bat. That bat for the Mets will be Luisangel Acuna. John Heyman reported that pretty soon after the game on Sunday that Acuna's coming back, which makes sense. Gives you that pinch runner off the bench, the speed, the defensive versatility. Another right-handed bat too. So good to see Acuna come back up. He'll definitely help. Francisco Alvarez caught the entire game on Sunday in Syracuse, so that is a good sign. He went 1 for 5 with a single and 3 strikeouts. We'll see how he recovers from catching a whole game with a broken pinky. He'll then have, of course, the day off because Syracuse and all minor league teams don't play on Mondays. And I imagine that he will still end up needing a couple more rehab games. So think Tuesday, Wednesday. Earliest you see Alvarez is Friday in Cincinnati. But I think you'll see him by the time the Mets get to Philadelphia. So they might give him 1 full week in Syracuse to just get a bunch of at-bats under his belt. He can DH some along with catching where, with the big league club, a little bit tougher to get him DH at bats. And then you have him, rejoin the team in Philly for that big series. I really think he'll be there by then, though, because he's going to try to play through this thing. Guy's a warrior, and it's going to be interesting to see how he looks once he gets back. But again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. The at-bats can't get much worse than what Luis Torrens and Hayden Singer are providing. I think the other side of it, though, is Alvarez going to be a detriment to the pitching staff because he can't throw and control the running game, or maybe he's not able to receive as well. But honestly, if it was a thumb injury on his receiving hand, I'd be a little more concerned. When you think about framing, the pinky on catching is really, I think they can probably immobilize that if they can tape it up. And I don't know how much it's really going to bother him when it comes to catching. So that's the latest on Alvy. Jose Siri and Jesse Winker continued their rehab in Port St. Lucie, but I don't think they're going to factor into this roster mix for a minute here. Jose Siri played the full game at DH on Sunday, went 1 for 4 with an RBI double. Winker has gotten to 2 games as the DH, 0 for 5 with 4 strikeouts facing teenagers and guys in their early 20s in low A. So I don't think Winker is a guy I'd be counting on this year, but we'll see. Once either of those guys makes it up to the upper levels and are performing on rehab, then we can start to talk about them. But at this point, when it comes to the position player side of things, I think Acuna is the September call-up. He already is going to be the September call-up. I think he's the only guy that you can see added to this roster for the next couple of weeks outside of Alvy coming back. When Alvy comes back, either you send down Sanger so you can keep Acuna on your bench, or you send Acuna right back down if you want to have 3 catchers on the roster. You could send down Ronnie Mauricio, and I can understand that because he's barely playing. But I believe Mauricio will stay on this roster all season because he has spent 17 days in Syracuse this year. And so if he were to be optioned again, he would spend 20 days in the minor leagues. And based on the roster rules, if you have a player who's in an option year, which Mauricio is, and they spend 20 days in the minor leagues, you use that option year. If they spend less than 20 days in the minor leagues, you retain that option. And for Mauricio, who could be part of this team again next year or could be traded, either way, keeping that option year attached to Mauricio is very valuable. So I don't think that they're going to send him to the minor leagues. I think, if anything, he just sort of rots on the bench for the rest of the year. Granted, if you needed to get Winker up or something like that, the Mets might have to do it. But I don't know. I mean, that could be something where by the time that Jesse Winker's ready to come up, the season has ended in Syracuse and it doesn't matter. So who knows? That's all we got on the roster front. A lot of news to update on September 1st with this being call-up time. But I want to close out the show with your series preview. So we're going to talk Mets-Tigers to close things out here in just a minute. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, it's easy, and honestly, it's my favorite way to follow along with football because you can check out your projections, and maybe it's Josh Allen. You're looking at more or less on 270 passing yards. Maybe it's Saquon Barkley, more or less on a rushing touchdown, or Malik Neighbors, more or less on a receiving touchdown. The best part, though, is if you combine all 3 of those guys into one lineup, if one of your picks misses, Prize Picks invented the flex play so you can still double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. For an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks on the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, things don't get any easier for the New York Mets, although could they even get harder than playing the Marlins in August or September? That might be the toughest matchup you're going to see down the stretch. But in all seriousness, you're about to play a very good baseball team. The Detroit Tigers are the best team in the American League by record, although right now I would take the Blue Jays over them. They're right behind, and they've been the hotter team as of late. But still, the Tigers are coming off a winning month, and they are the first team in the AL to reach 80 wins. Like the Mets, they are much better at home than on the road. They are 44-25 at home compared to 36-33 on the road. They just beat the Royals in a 3-game set on the road. But prior to that, they went to Sacramento and got swept by the A's. Again, 16-12 month of August for the Tigers. Now, on the season, this team has been pretty good offensively. 11th in team OPS, 8th in runs scored over the last 30 days. Still 11th in OPS, but actually 16th in runs scored. So their lineup is going through a little bit of a lull. Their pitching has been top 10 in ERA all year. They're coming in at number 7 on the season. For the last 30 days, they're coming in at 9th in baseball in ERA. So a team that pitches very well, that can be a little bit streaky offensively. And right now, you're looking at Riley Green as the one hot hitter in the lineup that has some thump. Gleyber Torres has been hitting pretty well lately, hitting 300 over his last 11 games played with a 451 on base percentage, but not much slug to his game right now. Spencer Torkelson obviously has a lot of power. He's hit a bunch of home runs this season, but he's going through a little bit of a slump. So the Mets can absolutely outslug this team, but it is a tough team to hit in that ballpark in Comerica where they are so good at home. The good news for the Mets, they will miss the probably likely back-to-back Cy Young winner in Tarik Skubal, who pitched on Sunday, leading his team to that series victory. So instead, the Mets are going to see Charlie Morton, potentially a bullpen game, in Casey Mize. First game up today, Manaea versus Morton. And for those of you who aren't aware, with Labor Day, it is a day game today. So if you're listening to this in the morning, make sure you don't miss the Mets game. Morton faced the Mets as an Oriole on July 10th, gave up only 1 run over 6 innings pitched. He has pitched to a 4.61 ERA since the trade. He has 3 quality starts and 2 clunkers. So it seems like it's very hit or miss for Morton. So hopefully it's a miss for him today and a lot of hits for the Mets. He's coming off one against the A's in Sacramento where he gave up 5 runs, but that's obviously not an easy place to pitch. Manaea is still searching for his first real great start of the season. Last time out, though, he struck out 8 over 4 2/3 and gave up 2 runs against the Phillies. It was a step in the right direction. Now, Casey Mize would be available, you would think, to start on to start on Tuesday on 5 days rest, but instead he is listed for a Wednesday. So we don't know who's going to pitch for the Tigers on Tuesday. I will let you know if it's reported on tomorrow's show who's going to be going. But it would appear right now like maybe it's a bullpen game for the Tigers, and you're going to get Nolan McLean pitching on Tuesday. So the Mets have a very good shot to win that game. Game 3, it's going to be Clay Holmes versus Casey Mize. Mize got off to a great start this season. He had a 2.63 ERA dating back to as recently as July 5th. Since then, fallen off a cliff. Last 8 starts, he's given up 4 or more runs 4 times, 3 or more runs 6 times, and one of his starts where he gave up less than 3 runs, he only gave 1 earned, but he only got 5 outs. He threw 59 pitches in an inning and 2/3 and got pulled, having only given up 1 earned run, 2 runs overall. I guess the bullpen bailed him out of whatever jam he was in. So this is not a very hot pitcher. You look at his ERA in July at a 6.32 ERA, and that includes a 7-inning shutout performance to open up the month for him. That's where we got back to that ERA on July 5th of 2.63. It was after going 7 shutty. Since then, obviously, it's been very rough. He had a 5.81 ERA in the month of August. So if you get to game 3 in a rubber match, you feel pretty good about the Mets' chances to hit Mize, and hopefully Clay Holmes could deliver a good start for the Mets. But in the meantime, you got the pitchers that you want on the mound. I'm encouraged by Manaea's last start, and I'm excited to see what it does today. And of course, Nolan McLean is appointment television at this point, and we get to watch him on Tuesday. So that's what we have in store with the Mets playing the Tigers this week. Of course, after every single game, you're going to have shows from me in the morning, breaking down what we saw and looking ahead to what is coming. And of course, I will keep you updated on all of the players that are still rehabbing and any roster news that we get as the Mets try to figure out what is their best course of action here to put together the best roster possible to win as many games as they can to hold on to this playoff spot. As right now, even though it's still a 4-game lead, that can slip quickly. So the Mets got to snap out of this recent skid. They got to just flush that series against the Marlins and get themselves on track on the road, which hasn't always been their forte this year. But this is a 10-game stretch where they have to play good baseball. If they can make it out of it with a winning record, that would be amazing. But I'd even take 5-5 through this stretch if that meant that they won one of these next 2 series or even both of these series and at least took a game in Philly. But I just want the Mets to keep their heads above water here. Ideally, they play much better than that and maybe even play so well and beat up the Phillies again where they could still turn it into a race. Right now, though, just focus one series at a time. Mets have to try to beat the Tigers this week in Detroit. Not the easiest of tasks, but they got some good arms in the mound to try to do it. So we will see what is in store and how it all unfolds. As always, thank you all for listening or watching. If you are listening, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching, subscribe. Help us get to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider and be part of our texting service, again, you can find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out the Fire TV College Football Kickoff. It's another big moment for Locked On and college football fans because Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate guide to college football with their weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside 2-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts will all join the show. A college football preview only Locked On can put together. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season only on Fire TV.